the worldwide net, the social media networks, and how the latest studies are demonstrating that the excessive use of this, not for work, not for, say, accomplishing research projects, say, if you're a student and you need to look up data, but rather just for the hell of it.
Right, for the quick dopamine hit
Right.
that you get.
So it's an addictive behavior, like many others are, and we can talk about those in a minute. But focusing on this, we know that the average amount of time that teenagers use social media outlets is between 6 and 7 hours a day in the United States.
Wow.
So let's say you have 24 hours, you're going to sleep 8 hours. So you're going to go to school for another, say, 7 to 8 hours. So
the math's not adding up there, Fred. There's not much time left.
That's right. Correct. So you are impacting your daily lives by bombarding your brain with an addictive behavior that has been shown to increase anxiety, poor self-esteem, depression, substance abuse, despondency, suicide, especially in young men, acting out, aggressive behaviors, including, of course, rebelliousness against parents and other perceived people in a position of power, such as school teachers, community leaders, etc. So, to me, the studies clearly indicate that using social media, other than research, other than for schoolwork, less than 2 hours a day is the recommendation.
But nobody's doing it.
Very few are doing it. Remember, I was telling you last week, I think I had a total of 1.7 hours of screen time for my entire week, which is probably a pretty low for me. I'm probably around an hour a day.
Right.
Is my usual. And you made the comment, well, I use it to listen to music. Okay, that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right, yeah, of course.
I'm talking about being addicted to sites that are impacting your self-esteem, whether it's the instant photographic alleged pleasure you get from getting likes, from the selfie generation type behavior, and or getting the criticisms, or feeling the critical nature of not being liked because it is pointed at you now. You're not only criticizing those online, but now you're receiving either lack of attention, you are not receiving sufficient attention that you believe you deserve.
And that makes you feel bad.
Or
you're getting negative attention.
Correct. And both of those, to different degrees, lower your baseline dopamine production at your nucleus accumbens and other important centers in the brain that regulate neurotransmitters. And as you all know already from prior discussions, you need a little bit of dopamine high to feel good. It's the euphoria, happiness hormone. You need the second part of this is actual social contact, physical contact, the presence of somebody.
Because that gives you oxytocin. That's right.
The so-called love hormone, right? So that one allows you to increase serotonin, which makes you less depressed, and at the same time promotes the production from baseline of spikes in dopamine, which gives you the happiness and slight euphoria while mitigating pain and painful stimuli.
So what it sounds like to me, if I can just paraphrase it, you in my own words, it sounds like social media is giving people too much dopamine, which is
quick bursts,
which is lowering their baseline level because they're overusing it, while simultaneously giving them illusion of social contacts without the oxytocin.
Correct.
And both those things are going to lower the sex drive,
compound, and lower their natural biologic libido drive.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So when an animal, for example, if you look at the animal world as an example, because, we are animals, we've evolved over, millions of years as animals on this earth. If you see an animal that has been abused, that has not been properly sheltered and fed, they sit in a corner. They are suspicious. They are in fear. their stress hormones are extremely high. So when a human being finds him or herself, or depending on your gender, whatever you determine you are, in a similar situation where you're not receiving those nice dopamine highs every day, natural ones.
Yeah, right.
I'm not talking about stimulants, and we'll go into stimulants in a second, or other negative behaviors that people take on to give themselves a little extra dopamine RNA production and then the actual neurotransmitter. So those animals aren't reproducing. They sit in a corner in fear. They want almost no contact because they don't trust the authenticity of that contact, right?
Yeah, that's right. I had a friend who had a rescue dog, exact same thing. Her dog was very skittish.
It takes a long time. Young teenagers often isolate, often stay in their bedroom far longer. When dinner time comes around, often the parents become very frustrated when that child forgoes the dinner altogether and or wants to take their plate back to the room.
Right.
To usually go back on social media.
Or eats it so fast and goes right back.
While on social media.
That's right.
Right? So the typical position is one hand, let's say assume they're right-handed, the fork here, the attention on the social media, the parents over there, sometimes the TV on, and there's zero interaction with those around you, zero oxytocin. There is the negative, however, interaction of an ongoing addiction. And that brings down your ability to produce dopamine. Or perhaps that young teenager came down with some positive expectations. Maybe the mother was supposed to get them a present or good news. And that anticipation initially gave a little dopamine, but upon coming down, maybe the mother didn't have time to pick up the new dress, and the anticipation actually is not met with reward, and so the dopamine level goes even further down. So unmet anticipation is a very negative, or has a very negative effect on the baseline dopamine levels.
Now, that is a very interesting point.
Yes.
Because one of the things that I have noticed about social media is that because it's all out there for everybody, people have very unrealistic high expectations about how their life is going to turn out.
Absolutely.
I had a buddy. He went to university. They were told, oh, yeah, you're doing great in your degree. You're going to be preeminent in your class. Then he went to the job market.
Right.
And there weren't all these offers out there.
He wasn't getting recruited. And when he was, it was for a much lower, say, compensation level.
Right.
Even entry level or less, with tasks that were very demeaning given their level of education.
Right.
And so so that takes us to the second part, which is unmet expectations. And you said it beautifully. So the social media breeds unmet expectations. Unmet expectations, though, are also come from bad parenting that my generation implemented back in the 80s of giving everybody a medal, telling everyone, you're special, you're the best, you're beautiful, you can do anything. Oh my God, you're a star.
Everyone thinks they're a 10.
Yes. So when everyone walks around thinking they're a 10, and when at some point reality hits, because very few people are 10s, and we're not talking just about looks, okay?
No,
we're talking about abilities.
Right, of course.
Right? So let's emphasize that it's more than just the physical appearance of an individual. And then all of a sudden, reality hits, and you realize, okay, I'm at 3 here. I don't even know how to program these things that I'm supposed to have learned already.
Right.
And I don't know how to do it when my new boss throws a assignment and I don't know how to do it. And I'm stuck. And it creates anxiety, release of stress hormones. So unmet expectations from our child rearing practices that I think my generation did not do as well as we could have. Because we didn't put them through that low-level stress. We took away the stress.
Right.
We had stress in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
There were tough times. Remember when Jimmy Carter was president?
I remember.
To 80. We could not drive more than 55 miles an hour. Cost of gas was through the roof. Interest rates were in excess of 10% to buy new homes.
Yep.
Right? the cost of basic products from bread, eggs, flour, meats, vegetables was through the roof.
Sure.
Right? Economy was tough. The U.S. was in a tough position. I'm not trying to blame anybody or a political party here.
No, but
this was a process that occurred over years.
There was more hardship.
Yeah, there was a lot of hardship.
And then in the 80s,
good times started to come. There was an initial bump, but then the economy picked up. And when Reagan was president and there was more affluence, there were some amnesty programs that allowed somewhere between 3 and 4 million people to become legal residents and acquire a green card. That created, an incentive also for more immigration, but also for people to feel, okay, I'm accomplishing something here. It's really allowing me to be a significant individual in the society, not just a ghost or a shadow, right? That is always scared and sleeping with one eye open.
Right.
Fearing
INS.
Or others in the middle of the night. I don't know if ICE existed in there, but certainly
it
INS.
used to be INS, yeah.
INS, right? So back to this. So unmet expectations occur also from ourselves. Because if we have an unrealistic self-analysis of what our abilities are, then we tend to, unfortunately, fall into that Kruger-Dunning effect concept.
Dunning-Kruger,
yes. The psychologists that describe a very important phenomenon whereby people of mediocre ability rate themselves as performing beautifully and wonderfully and excellently.
It's not just in ability, it's also in looks, they discover.
And looks too, right? And then the other side of that coin is, of course, that someone who's of great level in whatever their field is or their looks thinks that everybody is the same as him or her.
Right, doesn't realize
that they're not at that level. So they may talk about, say, physics or chemistry or math or calculus or organic chemistry.
Or cardiology.
In certain ways. And he thinks that, or she, that the audience is following right along.
Right.
When that may not be the case.
Right.
Right? So in this case, though, we're talking about the former example of people of mediocre ability thinking themselves of much higher performance. And so when those expectations are not met, they don't get promoted, they don't get a raise, their salary...
It hurts them more.
Yes, it hurts them a lot more.
Because if I have realistic expectations for myself, I know it's going to be a struggle, then I'm anticipating the struggle.
Yes.
And I'm able to navigate it.
Yes.
Whereas when I think it's going to be easy street, and then it's the same struggle that I would have had anyway,
correct,
it makes my mental health go down,
yes,
which lowers my sex drive.
Absolutely.
Okay.
More stress hormones, right? So more of the catecholamines, more of cortisol and others that unfortunately inhibit the machinery at the hypothalamic nuclei, the arcuate nucleus, and the nucleus accumbens, and another one called the ventral tegmental area. These, in coordination, do not allow that person to truly have those dopamine highs throughout the days when small tasks can be so refreshing and rejuvenating.
Right.
Doing something right, or calling a friend about and sharing, say, some report, or discussing with a colleague who may be in that same office or off-site to say, hey, I was given this thing, how did you do it? Oh, we came up with the same app. Fantastic, right? We're on the right track at solving. Maybe I'm going to cut my company another 2-3% in overhead this month because I was able to implement certain strategies. And your boss says, wow, you saved the company a lot of money. You were in for a bonus, kid. Go at it. I need this other result by the end of the week. And so that challenge gives you more endorphins. So challenges, when they are positively met with a result, actually give you a positive reinforcer on more dopamine production and less of the stress hormones. And so when you go out at night to celebrate, or you call this girl you've been dating and say, hey, dinner on me tonight, you're already, working the neurotransmitters to fall into a more intimate alignment with that person, because that person sees you.
The way you put it sounds so romantic.
Yes,
but I get your point. I get your point.
Yeah, you know, since we are the cumulative result of our neurochemistry, what are sensations, what are memories? It's chemicals in our brain, right? So we have to align them in certain ways so that we optimize them day to day. And so the other part of it is that the physical interactions, because of the social media, because of unmet expectations, have become less and less effective.
I see.
Right? So people are less likely to just say, I'm going for a walk and then we'll get coffee. Let's all meet up there. I get off work at 5. Yeah, I don't feel like going happy hour and drinking alcohol, but I got a book. What are you doing? Well, I'll meet you over there. It's a 30-minute walk, so you get your sunshine. You breathe in, hopefully, some fresh air. You get a little exercise, right? You contemplate your surroundings. By the time you arrive at that coffee shop and your friend arrives a few minutes later, perhaps, and you share a coffee or water, you have already charged the necessary neurochemical pathways that will make that interaction fabulous, especially if one of you makes a splashy entrance. So what that means by that is one of you is radiant that day because says, guess what happened at work today?
Because you just got the bonus, right?
Or I solved this and my boss, you know, the prior team couldn't do it. It took me 2 weeks and I stayed up a few nights. And yes, I researched on the internet. And yes, I talked to someone overseas. And yes, I went to this company that's doing it differently. So now I put it all together and I got this bonus and it's on us.
But this isn't happening. So
not as much
because the stuff is going down.
Yeah, because again, it's all about now the next part. As I said, it's the lack of self-analysis to say it's not about me just feeling good for the sake of feeling good. In other words, you made a comment, "Hey kid, you know this wasn't done properly, so I need you to go back and redo it. Your assignment here, it's okay, but I know you can do better."
Right.
Oh, you hurt my feelings. Oh, I just can't handle that. Right? So there is this cultural mentality that has been ongoing and growing, unfortunately, among young people that feelings are more important than facts.
Sure.
Feelings.
Your own personal experience is
the truth, and it's what it is, and that's all it is. And your boss says, but your report is lousy.
Right.
You can't present this at the weekly meeting with the board.
Right.
I'm sorry. It's not up to par. You're an accountant.
Right.
You know better.
Right. The numbers have to.
Right. Oh, well, I don't feel well. I have a headache. I need to go home. I'm going to see my doctor, who will give me an excuse. I may not be back till next week. So there is a quicker jump to a importance. It's actually, I call it negative narcissism.
Okay.
Some people say narcissism is bad across the board. There is
a little bit.
There you go. Okay, that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's okay to feel some pride in whether it's your appearance, in grooming yourself, in staying healthy, in being a person who's a go-getter, who has confidence.
Well, there's a reason why so many CEOs are actual narcissists. If it had no positive effects, then it would have been bred out of our system a long time ago.
Right?
Obviously, too much is bad, but too little is bad.
Correct. So at some point, you've got to self-analyze and say, for example, if you're in university and you're taking a really tough class like organic chemistry, and you did your best, but you got a C-. And you know that the top student, because it's a tough pre-med class, got a B+. Nobody got an A. And you're a C-, and you're now so depressed over that and so down. And so the key is the challenge to go and talk to that great student, figure out why they got a B+, and try to, at least follow some of those strategies or recommendations and go back into it even deeper with a sense, this is a challenge. This isn't an opportunity for me to feel depressed. Oh, woe me, I'm going to drop the class and quit on myself. Right?
I can think of somebody that story is
applicable too. Of
Yeah.
course, we all know people like that. But I think that has been part of the more the younger cultures these days. Again, as a reason for not having sex. When you don't challenge yourself, for example, you ask a girl out, she says no, but you like her for whatever personal reasons you have, and she, she's giving you some indications. Maybe she's playing a little hard to get. So persist. Don't, an actor, when they go for parts, they get turned down. I'm going to say the most, 99% of the time.
More than that, yeah.
Perhaps more, right? 99 is pretty high.
Yeah.
To be turned down. And there are stories of those who've persisted and, after 700 auditions, they finally got the role, and then they were great and became, very successful and got all kinds of parts, right? So that kind of example is very useful. Rejection should be turned into a positive, because rejection also, again, plays with these neurocircuitry and increases stress and depression and anxiety. And each time, if it's not channeled correctly as a challenge to do better next time, whether it's in sports, academics, in business, or in pursuing someone you want to date, your dopamine, because anticipation is not met, your dopamine level is way down, and that gap between where your dopamine should be here and you're down here every day, now you have this gap, and the wider that gap is, the more anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and other self-harm, and then other behaviors such as substance abuse disorders, whether it's alcohol, marijuana, stronger drugs, all the way to opiates, heroin, fentanyl, and other behaviors that are more OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, such as gambling, spending, sex addictions for the wrong reason. Right? Pornography addictions. Correct?
Well, unfortunately, there isn't the sex addiction. That's what we would like a little more sex addiction. We don't have enough. They're not having enough sex.
Right, but the sex addiction is a form of anxiety and depression. Right? So that's not the type of interaction that is necessarily going to give you a long-lasting dopamine production and happiness. The addiction is minimally fulfilling with a tiny little spike of dopamine, and you go back to an even deeper level, and you need the next high. You need the next one, like shopping addictions, like gambling addictions.
Or just social media.
Right.
All of them.
Like the addiction that comes from those, in places where gambling is legal, with pulling on the slot machine or betting money you don't have, or constantly betting on whatever aspect of a football game. Yesterday was NFL day. So you're betting on, the kickoff, on who's going to get the first down, and who's going to catch the first pass. I mean, just to a level that is highly intoxicating, but not necessarily in a positive way.
Right.
Okay? So I understand you want to bet a little money on whatever sport is fine, but that can't be the only dopamine high you're getting day to day, right? So we talked about social media, okay?
Expectations.
Yeah. Too much use of the social media platforms, not unmet expectations across the board. A guy that decided not to go to university and whose father is a lawyer, high-ranking lawyer, okay? You've got to figure a way to get your parents on board on why you didn't go to university.
Sure.
Not just laziness or lack of interest in a particular subject, but what are you doing with your life that is constructive? Because not everybody is meant to go to university. Not everybody is meant to acquire higher education, right? And often, unfortunately, people go that way and they're incredibly unhappy because they weren't meant to. They would have been better off in a trade school, in a junior college.
We need welders.
Or simply starting their own business, whatever that may be.
Sure.
Okay? And it cannot just be all online businesses of doing stores to sell whatever product.
Well, unless you're making a ton of money, then that
but
would
very
be
few do.
Right.
Very
of course,
few people.
Of course.
Okay. It's not a channel. It's not a mainstream channel. Okay. So the next is, I think, mainstream media, the media at large. whether it's movies and the mainstream media, because there's a lot of negativity right now about the role of men in society, especially in Western societies.
Sure.
Even though, of course, in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, some places like in Latin America, the patriarchy is still the predominant model for society.
Right.
Right? So Western societies, I think, and I'm including, of course, Scandinavian countries where they usually have the happiest index scores per year. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, of course, at the top of that list, among others. And then if you look, the patriarchal countries are usually at the lowest end. Right?
Sure, right.
Right? So, of happiness.
Happiness, right.
You know, including Middle East countries, African countries, some
Sure.
in Southeast Asia, right? So, if you look at it in Western societies, I think the idea that men are evil oppressors and causing women a lot of harm is an outdated thought. I don't think that is what predominates these days. That's just my personal opinion.
Sure.
Okay? So big disclaimer, I'm not a sociologist. I'm not studying the psychology of the moment. I'm a medical doctor, so I have less knowledge in those areas. Okay?
Well, I do know that the young men are told, my son is like this, they're told, oh, if you approach that girl, you're harassing her.
Right.
So rather than figure out some convoluted way to approach the girl without harassing her, he just doesn't bother.
Doesn't bother, yeah.
Because he doesn't want to be...
Exactly.
And he has actually said to me, he's like, yeah, Dad, so then I can get slapped and go to jail for rape?
Yeah, or get to the principal's office
Right.
because of my microaggressions.
Right.
Because I told the girl that I really like the way she's wearing her hair.
Right.
Right?
Right.
For example.
He would never.
Right. So that has spread like wildfire.
Sure.
And so the young boys who traditionally would have, given a girl a flower, some chocolates, or maybe a toy bear or what have you, especially at Valentine's, they're scared. They're growing up now with this idea that women don't need them, don't want them. They see them as offensive creatures, what people coarsely and rudely called, the male toxicity model, right?
Toxic masculinity.
There you go, toxic masculinity. So, that also causes more stress among those young men who are going through puberty, who have natural increase in their libido, who want a relationship with a girl as friends initially, of course, and want the ability to feel comfortable and not rejected by any minor advance.
Well, it's like a pendulum, right? Because it used to be that the women were a bit uncomfortable because it was too aggressive.
Yes.
And now we've swung too far, I think, the other way, where the men are uncomfortable, and the result is even less sex.
Less interaction.
Right.
And, it doesn't help when there are dozens and dozens of current podcasts detailing that women don't need men. I can have a body count of as many as I want. And then when I'm ready, I'll just get with a guy, if I want to have children.
Right.
And is there a consideration for standards, that men may have standards, that men may not be okay with whoever they're going to get together with, of having high body counts, meaning people that have had sex, many partners, right? That in essence had very little to do with intimacy and happiness. And it was because I consider myself, independent and extreme feminist, whatever you want to label it.
Strong, independent woman.
Yeah. I think there's a balance. I think it all starts with respect, kindness, and accepting that boys, teenagers, young men and women are different. We have different brains. We in the cardiology world, when we see a patient, it's extremely important to know their biologic gender, right? Because...
You mean their biological sex?
Sex, sorry. Because, men have heart attacks earlier. And typically, as men, have more, I'm talking about XY chromosome men, have more risk factors.
Sure. Yeah, we had a whole
for
podcast on
cardiovascular
that.
disease,
Right.
earlier heart attack, stroke, sudden cardiac death, heart failure.
We'll put a link to that podcast.
Yeah, and also prostate issues as time goes on. You don't get away from that just because you say, I am a woman. You don't. So, and women have fewer of these issues, but they may have others.
They have other issues, right?
Like women have more of the type of heart failure that's considered diastolic dysfunction, where the heart is strong but stiff for a variety of reasons, right? More often, they may have chest pain with normal coronary arteries. They have microvascular angina, not the typical blockages that you see in the coronary arteries. So there are important differences.
Sure.
There are certain congenital issues or diseases that are more common in one versus the other, and so on, right?
Right, sure.
Including autoimmune disorders more common in women. Again, XX females. Right?
When we say men and women on this discussion, we're not talking about gender.
No.
0%. We're not even involved with that discussion.
No.
We're just talking about biological sex.
Correct. So when there is this divide.
And why we're not having sex.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
And the gulf that is occurring is being promoted, I believe, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, by not only social media platforms, but mainstream media platforms, movies.
Sure.
Right? Changing the dialogue to often emasculate and bring lower the self-esteem, collective self-esteem of young men.
Right.
So they're not going to be up to par with themselves to risk asking a girl to go out and eventually becoming boyfriend-girlfriend and eventually being intimate. It's just less likely to happen. The next two are easier to kind of understand, I think.
Well,
finances.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yes.
I was going to say,
money.
It makes a big difference, right? That
Yeah.
home ownership for that age group is like lower than ever.
Yes, and two kids that I have now that are, in their mid-20s, they're paying rent, they live together, they're looking at buying a house, and I was looking at the deal they're being offered, and yes, it's an FHA loan, yes, they only have to put 3.5% down, and, the interest rate is controlled for the first little bit, year or two, but it's still extremely high.
Right.
Their payments are high, and now they have to go to areas of the city that are not as safe, and certainly traditionally have been places of a lot of crime.
High crime, right.
Yeah, and not a lot of surrounding.
That's all they can afford.
Right, immediate surrounding, places, parks, for example, that are safe, or restaurants, movie theaters, bars they can go to that are safe. They're less prevalent in those areas.
Right.
And so, as my son says, to go out on a date with somebody, I'm going to spend $150 on a minimum on a first date.
Right.
Just because of the cost of the drinks. I'm not going to take her to a dump. So if I want to take a girl somewhere that's nice, it's expensive.
Sure.
Right? And so on top of that, to buy a house, they're getting somewhat roped in by, I would say, predatory type practices of home builders, the ones that are usually massive across the country, to get these kids in there. And then they got a 30-year mortgage, and they are depressed about the amount they have to pay. And while rents right now are extremely high as well,
right,
given our economy over the last, say, 24 months or so, with increasing interest rates, increasing inflation, the fact of the matter is, so because of COVID, supply lines were affected and cost of materials was affected, cost of construction is higher, fewer are buying, so interest rates, especially in certain parts of the country, have skyrocketed. So paying rent is very expensive.
So and when people are financially
Strapped.
They, like all anxiety,
same
they
thing.
have less
Dopamine, less of the oxytocin opportunity, less libido, less likely to say, do you want to go on a date? Instead of opting to go more social media, TV, and stay at home with a cheap meal without social interaction. And this is happening to kids. Of my 3 boys who are in their mid-20s, not one has a girlfriend.
Wow. And
not one.
And I don't usually judge men, but all three are very handsome.
They're handsome. They're fit. They all work. They make a good living. One of them makes 6 figures. The other one probably close to that. He could make more, but he chooses to work a little less and more private time. And so, the university graduates and so on.
Right.
None of them have a girlfriend.
That is,
and we're talking 25 to 29 years of age. That is incredibly odd. I think of myself at that age.
Oh, me too.
And exactly,
I either had a girlfriend or I was actively pursuing one.
Correct, or more than one. So
that's why they call him Dr. Suave.
So different times, but the point is obvious.
Right.
Finances get in the way. The rejection issue that some of them are not as capable of handling.
Sure.
I know one of my kids gets really down when a girl rejects him, even though he's 6'3", 180 pounds, and beautiful. Absolutely model-like, right? Better looking than almost anybody on TV or movies.
Well, a father's love, but he's certainly a good-looking guy.
Yeah. So, really? And so I'm trying to explain all this through all of these behavior patterns. So when the media's promoting strife across the world,
right?
Doomsday predictions, 12 years to live, or if we don't change climate policies, we're done.
Overpopulation. That's another one I hear.
Overpopulation, correct.
Where
too many children.
Yeah, there's too many kids out there. That's why.
Correct.
Yeah.
When other doomsday predictions, I put them under one category. So climate at the top of that, war, what is going on in Ukraine, Russian invasion, and the horrific things that have occurred.
Horrific.
Okay, for the rest of the world. When you have, on top of that, as I said, the war, patriarchy, you're a misogynist, you are a racist, you are a homophobe, you are Islamophobe, you are against immigration.
Transphobe.
All of it. That's what they're getting. And so there isn't, you're okay, kid. You're fine. Work hard at what you do. There are some voices, mostly on independent podcast platforms,
right,
that are saying,
like this one,
just do what you do well, try to be better, be accountable, try to be independent, pay your bills, okay? Don't spend over your limits,
right?
Live within your constraints, and gradually build a very positive life within you and around you. Hang out with positive people.
Well, here's the thing. I think one of the problems with that is that social media shows us outliers.
Yes.
And it shows us not only outliers, but the best absolute version of what people are. So,
and it's a lie.
Well, or at least an exaggeration.
Yes.
And so in the dating world, we know that women are hypergamous, which basically means they want to at least find someone on their level or better.
Sure, yes.
And in the olden days, you were in your town,
right,
and you had the pool of people around there.
Sure.
And you chose the best one you could find around there.
And you were fine with it.
And you did the best you could.
Yes.
But nowadays, Jane from Iowa,
right,
can see the billionaire 25-year-old who invented a new widget for the app.
In Tokyo.
Right.
And they're communicating.
And so, right. And so what you have is a few of the eligible, successful ones are getting 80% of the attention. And the ones that are actually have a more realistic life that are doing sort of what's normal.
Yes.
They're lacking.
They're being bypassed.
Or the girls are kind of
wishy-washy. Yes.
Yeah, because they know that there's this other guy out there that they have a unrealistic, what we were talking about, very unrealistic chance of getting with them because but they think they're a 10 because they were always given medals growing up. And so they think, I should get a guy like that. So so either you need to be like that.
Yes.
And for guy, it takes a while. Sometimes success doesn't necessarily happen linearly and exponentially.
Correct.
It can happen, but for most people, it's a much more circuitous path.
Yes.
But in the meantime, their esteem is low. They're getting less attention than they would have in the past.
They have financial constraints.
And it's like a spiral.
Yes. The dating sites are, you described beautifully that phenomenon that occurs on the dating site scene, which is a predominant way young people are meeting each other.
Right.
So, I totally agree. And it creates more of a poor self-esteem because, as you mentioned, only a small percent, maybe 5-7% of the guys are actually getting attention from
Right.
The vast majority of women on those sites.
I can't imagine how hard it would be for me to date in my present situation, 3 kids, divorcee, if I wasn't 6'2".
Yes. Well, it's a tough world out there, and there are other minor factors that contribute to less sex. I would say more of the kids are living at home, less independence,
Right.
because of the various factors we mentioned.
The financial, right?
The financial. Many who have school debt stay with their parents longer, even after graduation, to pay exorbitant loans that were incurred over the last 20 years, and even
the college model.
The college model is horrific.
It's broken.
Yes, it is. I did medicine, and others have gone to law school, engineers, chemists, nursing. There are a number of professions that are very rewarding because people generally do very well if they stick with it,
right?
If they persevere. But then the vast majority are not in those professions. And I could have mentioned a couple more in that list, but the vast majority are not. And a lot of humanities degrees the kids were sold a certain bill of goods at a very high price.
Study women's studies, and then the world is
Correct.
Your oyster.
And so that doesn't translate into real world employment. High expectations are not met once again.
Right.
Lots of debt.
That spiral.
So independence is lacking. I was telling my daughter not long ago that, as you recall, in London, before you're 18, as you're graduating from the equivalent of high school, parents are going, what time are you moving out?
Yeah.
Dad, I graduate in 3 months. Yeah, let's start planning it.
Right.
So you're on your own, right? Out.
I remember, as you know, I went to university in England, and I was... It was a stark contrast to how kids are raised here.
No doubt.
Where the parents are like, okay, time to get a job and get your own place, and let's get this show on the road.
Right. And now, on occasion, I get the typical message, it's not fair. My gym membership costs so much, and the gas is so expensive. And of course, I have to go socialize because that's the way we do it today. We have to meet at bars and go to restaurants, and that's how me and my friends do it. My God. Why can't you send me $3,000?
Right. That's the subtext at the end, right?
Right. So, there's very little gratitude. There is very little, please. There are very little acknowledgments about maybe I should get a part-time job and live within my means,
right?
And not go for a happy hour or others 5 times a week. Oh, and maybe I shouldn't go to the football game every weekend or travel to where my college team is playing every time. Right? Among other behaviors. So there's an entitlement concept that also goes to less sex. The more entitled you are, and you mentioned it briefly on the dating scene of girl saying she's a 10.
Right.
Okay? The more entitled you are, the less you're going to accept an average guy that may be the future Bill Gates in 5 years or 10 years.
Or maybe not even the future Bill Gates. He might just be a future
great husband,
upper middle class guy.
And great dad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
With great morals and great character, because he's not wearing a $2,000 suit or driving a $100,000 car. Right. Or able to go on trips right now. And the guy may say, well, I'm saving money right now because I want to get a house in 5 years. So I put it, my extra way. I've got a student loan I'm taking care of. And of course, I'm paying my own rent, my own clothes, my own food, etc. Right? So the independence has gone down.
Right.
When independence goes down, sex goes down with it.
Got it.
It's a slippery slope.
And it seems like all these factors are conspiring together.
Yes.
It's not just one thread that you can pull.
No, that's why...
It's like they're all intermeshed.
Yeah, that's why this conversation, in my opinion, is very interesting, because it's not like a table. You can say, oh, this is and equals this and that. This is not accounting. It's not engineering. This is not physics or chemistry, where there's a formula and there's an answer.
Right.
There may be aspects of one or more of these phenomena that may apply to one group and not others, right? So, to me, the less accountability and less independence, the less sex.
Right. That makes sense.
It goes in that direction. If someone's done a study, please send it to us. Again, I am not a psychologist or a social scientist, just a country doctor taking care of people with diabetes.
Now, I will make one point because I think it has to do with expectations of independence, and let me tell you why.
Yes.
As you know, who's having the most sex on the planet? I'll bring this up until this study
the
changes.
Greeks.
But they also live at home until they get married.
Yes. But that's a different culture.
But that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
Culturally, that's acceptable. So the girl doesn't say, oh, you live with your parents? Ugh.
No, exactly.
It's normal. Everyone's doing it. And then you find ways to sneak out and meet at the movies or the beach or wherever you can.
And in those countries, the old school way, sometimes the wife moves in.
With the family.
To save money
Yeah.
till they have their first child, and then they've saved enough
That's exactly
to be
right.
able to get their apartment or their new home with
That's
a little
exactly right.
help.
That's exactly right.
Right? And so it's a welcome type of environment, and it has more to do with a family togetherness.
But the expectations are there and the culture's there, so it's not it's not deleterious.
It's not the stigma
right
of failure.
Right.
The
you
stigma
live in your
of failure
parents' basement.
that goes with all of these things we're talking about. Oh, I went to school. I got a career that's useless. I'm useless. I'm not intelligent. I couldn't do the chemistry or the physics or the math, and therefore the STEM classes were too far out of my reach, and I had to go for this degree that's useless, and now I owe $200,000, and I'm working at a coffee shop.
Right.
Right? And I'm a failure. So there is this. Now, there are two other aspects to all this.
Yes. Okay.
People don't read anymore.
Wow.
Books.
You said it.
I said it. Oh my, is that wrong?
Well, I know
People don't read anymore
not like they used to.
for pleasure.
Right.
Sometimes for research, great, but for pleasure, whether it's novels, science fiction, whether it's
How about online articles?
literature. I think they can be good for it, depending, again, that's a research thing.
Right.
No, I'm talking a book. Go to the used bookstore, and for cheap, usually under $10, you can get great novels.
This is where I do my plug on libraries.
Yes.
For free, you can read any book you want out there.
There you go.
But people aren't doing it.
No. So that has gone way down.
Yeah.
And even worse than that, and the reason why the internet can be bad in this regard is that people read the first line, the title and the first line, and that's it.
Right.
And then maybe the article is 10 pages long or 3 pages or whatever.
That's a lot.
And the substance
That's
of the
a lot
article.
of reading, man. 10 pages.
The substance is in that body of work by that author that
Sure.
presumably put a lot of time and effort into it. And then you read someone with a different opinion than that author, or perhaps several.
Right.
And then you come up with your own thoughts and ideas. That's not going on.
Yeah,
So
right.
there is an ideological title. There's one line to grab you, right?
The hook.
Can you imagine this podcast saying young people not having sex? And then the first line would be in an overpopulated world, this is good. Right? And that's all you read. You're, see, Dad, I told you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys, you had 6 children. What's wrong with you?
I have that.
So irresponsible.
Not on this topic, but my eldest son, who is very bright, as you know.
Yes.
But he
And very creative.
well, but he hears things on the internet, and he's like, "Well, this is what it is." Now.
Exactly.
And he hasn't read the bodies of
The
work,
body.
so I completely know where you're coming
Yeah.
from.
So repeating slogans.
Right.
Repeating talking points.
2 legs good,
And
4
again,
legs bad.
Yes.
Just like George Orwell predicted.
George Orwell, right? So Animal Farm, for those of you who haven't read it, please do.
And
Important
1984.
Political.
Both concepts are in those in both books of people memorizing slogans. Aldous Huxley said the same thing.
The same thing, yes.
People memorize slogans instead of actually thinking about it and having the cognitive framework
The
about
conversation.
That. Right.
Okay. So not reading and now accepting only the surface, the shallow, superficial comments and or ideas, incredibly damaging.
Right.
So the lack of profundity, lack of depth. And it's hard to overcome it because after a while, you just become accustomed. Well, that's the way it is. And so if the media says whatever agenda that channel or network or legacy media has, and you're just repeating the talking point over and over, then you are sheep. You're not a cognitively active, thinking, creative individual. You give that up. And, studies have looked at this, why some societies prefer less freedom, but more free stuff. Because of this concept. After a while, I have no ideas of my own. So someone tells me, well, the government will put a chip in your head, and they're going to know where you are, and they're going to give you a social credit score, and depending on that determines whether you get antibiotics if you go to the hospital, or you get a loan more favorable for a house loan if you are within these parameters, and you don't have your own ideas or thoughts or way to research it because you have given up on it, and you just accept the slogan.
If you don't use it, it atrophies.
Correct. Like a muscle, right? So all of those, and I can mention a couple of others that contribute to less sex.
What's the fifth one? You said
the beds are too comfortable, so people want to sleep. Huh? I bought a mattress for $500, and it's better than the $4,000 mattress I used to have. And you get into it and you fall asleep.
And that's hilarious. So
you have less sex. Like if you had a rickety mattress, you're like, honey, move over. Let's do this.
That reminds me of,
honey, I can't sleep through the night. Wake up. I need some sex.
On my wedding night, we were staying at the mansion for, first night together. And that was the most...
One of the great hotels in Dallas.
In the world, yeah.
Yes.
And that was the most comfortable bed I've ever been on in my life. My bride, my now ex-wife, but at the time, young bride, gets ready. This is very exciting.
Yes.
I literally go into the next room and just grab the champagne and the chocolate strawberries just around the corner.
And she's asleep.
Out!
On that comfortable bed.
Yeah, it was the most comfortable bed I've ever,
I'm trying to be,
funny.
I'm trying to joke. What I'm saying is people don't make the time for it.
Right.
People say, I've had a long day. I'm tired. It's too much to mount the effort to have intimacy. You have to make it a priority. No matter what goes on in life,
right?
You need to make it a priority for both and talk about it. Because if you're tired, you say, look, I have a long day. Okay, so when are you best? I like to get up and read early. I like to write in the mornings, as you know, before I go to see patients in the clinic. So maybe the morning is the best time.
Right.
For a quickie, for some intimacy, right? Sex, then coffee, then shower. You go to work with a little flair, with a little step.
Right.
A little extra step, right?
Right.
And so the planning of it, and I know that some people say, oh, it should always be spontaneous. Well, when you're together with someone for a little while.
Right.
Yes, being spontaneous is great. Going on holidays and doing things at the drop of a hat is important. But the reality is that to have intimacy, you have to have a willing partner, an intimate connection, and
circumstance.
time and the circumstance to say, yeah, this one we do it. Oh, honey, I made a reservation, and it could be 9 a.m. So what time will you go home at? Oh, 5:36. So why don't we walk for a 30-minute walk? Quick shower, and our reservation 7:30. We got just enough. Put your little sexy outfit. Tonight is going to be magical. So that person is thinking about it all day with little positive dopamines of positive expectations. And if it is actually accomplished the way it was proposed with a little flair, you end up sleeping beautifully that night. You get better sleep.
Right, of course.
Better sex, better sleep. And then discovering it. So you got to be able to discover it.
Hold on. Is lack of sleep causing
yes.
one of this?
Yes.
One of the...
Yeah. So that's
sorry
chronic
to interrupt
fatigue.
you.
So no, but so insomnia, sleep disorders, interrupted sleep because people sleep with their phone and the phone is lighting up throughout the night and it's pinging, or people are looking at various sites and you know who you are. This is deleterious. We know in the cardiovascular world that an uninterrupted sleep of between 7 and 8 hours is the optimal. Certainly no less than 6.5 hours uninterrupted.
Right.
And more than 8 is probably counterproductive. So there's a sweet middle there between, as I said,
for adults,
7
young people should
to
have
8,
more than 8.
And up to 8 or so, maybe a little more. The young teens, of course, 8 to 9. But we're talking really about now young adults.
Right.
Right? They're the ones that should be having sex, should be having frequent sex.
Right.
And so sleep is of paramount importance because of the chronic fatigue that may ensue, both physical and mental, if you don't rejuvenate on a nightly basis your neuron health, okay, is incredibly important. So another part is fast food industry. Again, remember I said the slippery slope. So less sleep or interrupted sleep,
Right.
more social media during your sleep hours, that should be off, absolutely.
Right.
All right, to allow you uninterrupted sleep. The less independence, correct?
Yeah.
Right? All of these, less sex. It's a curve like this, right? And the last thought on this was the less
Sleep.
Yeah, well, sleep we mentioned,
Yeah.
right? Independence, right? Mental stress. The more
The cultural aspect.
Yeah, we've talked about it
Yeah,
over the last hour or so.
Yeah.
But there is also that people are, to some degree, because of social media, addicted to variety.
Oh.
And less intimacy, and
how-
so less connection.
And how about the proliferation of online porn? Does that also contribute?
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked about a little bit.
We had a
of
whole
erotic
episode on that.
on
but,
that.
But that's another
So
factor, right?
so the more porn, the less realistic
So
intimacy
it sounds
and
like
connection.
It sounds like it's death by a thousand cuts.
Yes.
So how can we
Analyze who you are. You got to look at yourself in the mirror. You're an 18-year-old male, female, 20-year-old, 25, 30-year-old. You have to kind of look at yourself in a very critical way, not necessarily negative, self-flagellation and putting yourself down, but say, these are the areas that I need to, if I got an extra 20, 30 pounds, and because of that I snore, and so that extra weight is preventing me also from getting dates, is preventing me from having continuous sleep, that is causing me to release more estrogen, because, male hormone in the visceral space, adipose tissue, gets converted into female hormone.
We had
and the more female hormone, the less libido, the less sex drive.
Wow.
Right? So it's like a teeter-totter.
So the overweight epidemic is also contributing to this.
To less sex. Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
More in the obesity, more in the men than the women.
Right.
I think the guys will.
Yeah.
Right? Less impediments.
Right.
Less obstacles. But the other way, usually girls want a fit guy.
Right.
Right? Not maybe, if the guy's got a six-pack, great, even better. But just a guy who's obviously fit.
Right, takes care of himself
who's
a bit.
Radiant, who has that positive aura of health.
Has more testosterone.
Yes. So as the testosterone level collectively of the country has gone down because of, I said,
all these
fast
reasons,
food.
yeah.
So the more fast food, the less sex. The more obesity, the less sex.
Right.
The lack of independence, less sex. The
more
financial stressors, less sex.
Less sleep,
more
less
social
sex.
media, less sex.
Yeah.
See this? They're all like this.
Yeah. All the factors are going in that way.
So you look at these, which ones do I have? And you start going, okay, let me start correcting one by one, right? I think that is the best way, because it's not one size fits all, but it is one person's analysis of themselves that fits the situation.
Okay, so people taking their own bootstraps and fixing it, that's great, and I completely agree.
Yes.
How about collectively? What can we do? Like, it seems to me one easy fix for this, not fix,
Right.
but start towards the solution is affordable housing.
Yes.
If we had way more affordable
that's one
housing,
part.
then we would have people having more
Independence.
because the girl says, "Oh, I need a backyard for my dogs." Oh,
Correct.
This guy has a house, as opposed to he lives in an apartment.
Yes.
And now I'm not attracted to him.
Yes, and he lives in a decent area that's safe.
Right.
So we can go to the park. We can go get breakfast on the weekends and get a couple of tacos, for example. Walk. We can get sunshine. I can sit outside with my dog and a book and interact socially with neighbors without fear. So yes, affordable housing is important. And one of my kids is involved in 3D printing of affordable housing concept that costs less than $100,000. I think he's entering a worldwide contest on this because he's an architect.
Oh, that's great.
And he's very driven by this because he really wants to be.
Is this the same one that's trying to buy a house?
Yes, he's trying to be a solution or create solutions.
Oh, that's great.
For young people. You know, whether it's container homes, affordable housing, as I said, with new technologies where they can be made quickly, but they are robust. They have a foundation. They do have all of the usual perks, but in a restricted space. The home may be a total of 800 square feet, 1,200 square feet, maybe even smaller. But it can be a starter home. And some of those can be, sold to the next younger group.
Right.
And they ascend to a more traditional, larger home. But
the starter home, builders don't build them anymore because they don't have the margins.
Yes. And the economy hopefully will improve in that regard with materials that are not toxic to the environment, that are not cutting down trees, that are renewable, recyclable. All of these things will come.
Right. Hopefully.
Right? But it's important to create an emphasis that this is needed. Right. So this is a lot more difficult to own a home today than it was when I was younger, certainly, that it was a little bit easier to get into home ownership.
As a percentage of your income, homes were much cheaper.
When I bought my first 2 homes and, I was doing my residency, I just went with my degree. I don't think I even had $20,000 in the bank account. I went with my degree, and they were giving me loans of $400,000 up like that.
Right.
Now, you're a doctor. You're a resident. I know you're going to do well. So maybe those advantages played into it, right? Sure. I had no problem.
No, but homes were just much cheaper back then.
And they were more affordable. For greater quality.
Right.
For greater quality. Real bricks, real wood.
Right.
Right? Great roofs, great living spaces, and nice kitchens and all of those things that are more difficult. Anyway, so all of that I think it's an important point you make. I think you self-policing yourself with social media and negative social media aspects that we've touched on. I think really making an effort for meeting people in social spaces, whether they may be parks, grocery stores, theaters, concerts, hanging out at bars that you're not there for intoxication purposes, but really more for socializing purposes.
Like a pub kind of environment.
Yeah. And clearly, as I said, libraries, bookstores, got it? All of those. And having much more of an intent on a weekly basis of actually walking, and if you can, ride a bike. Others maybe go together in a car if they must to a place like that where they can meet people of their generation and interact and create a relationship, a connection.
Right.
Because all of this is about creating positive connections. The more positive connections you have with real human beings, the less social media negative use, less pornography, less less of the poor self-esteem.
What you just said, and I think I want to ask Roderick to join us for a few questions. But one thing you just said, I think
he's been watching porn over there.
About connections and social connections. One of the things that I've been hearing on various podcasts I listen to is the idea that men and women can't be friends, all these explanations. And I think that is the biggest bunch of BS. And let me explain why.
Yes.
By having friendships of the opposite sex doesn't mean that you want to get with each other.
Right.
But that's how you meet people.
They're friends.
The friends of friends.
Yes.
Meeting a friend of a friend is such
great.
a better introduction than going up to a bar and drunkenly saying.
Or online.
Or yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I
Great
think
point.
Just for that reason alone,
yes,
men and women can be friends.
Yes.
You might find this hard to believe.
Yes.
But most women I'm friends with are not attracted to me. I know. Yes. I know. It seems impossible to believe. But that's fine because we're just friends. And
yes. Who would have believed it?
Yeah.
Huh? Who would have believed it? But the point is that the naysayers say the reason why guys have female friends is because they're not the alpha male in that group. They're the beta male. And so they're just waiting for one day that girl
to have a moment of low self-esteem.
To all of a sudden, that girl who has always gone for the alpha male, all of a sudden she goes through a rough patch. And then there you are, the one that was there to hug me when I was crying, to give me self-comfort or some degree of comfort when my boyfriend cheated on me 3 times in 1 week, and now I get with you. So that's what the naysayers say. I think that's a narrow concept, although that may happen from time to time.
Sure.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I think the point you make is far more valuable because having interactions with the friends of friends, and then you find out oh my, we have similar interests, or you discover new groups that you would not have had access to had you not remained friends with them. But there's another reason for it, which is you see the behavior. You learn the
dynamic.
The dynamic. That's the social dynamic.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for example, I was watching on Netflix some show about monkeys in Africa and how their social structure is so complex. Of the alpha male in the group, and then the 5 helpers that go around that guy and scratch his back and all of these things. How they are really vying for that alpha male status, right? And then they get the pick of the females, and so on, right? And then the ones that don't fit into that, those males are sort of shoved to the side, and so on. It's a very complex issue. So in our human condition, to have the ability to socialize with people, especially people of the opposite sex, when they're
in a healthy
sex is not in the balance.
Right.
Sexual activity is not in the balance, but rather the social environment per se. Like yesterday, football occurred, so I'm sure a lot of young people got together, some of which were invited to football parties who were not there because they have a crush on the girl that owns the house or whose apartment it may be. But he wants to be there because 8 of her girlfriends are going to be there.
Right.
And he's going to just start, having fun.
Right.
And probably the football game is secondary.
Sure.
So that's what you were saying.
Yeah.
In essence.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very healthy way of interacting these days, and affordable. You're not spending a lot of money at a bar, and you can sit on a couch with somebody and really say, hey, you want to go out? You want to get together next week? You went to A&M. They're playing UT. Hey, let's go. Let's go at it. Let's put, $5 on the line, or, a couple of beers. And so it becomes fun. I think that's healthy.
All right, Roderick. I know you have some thoughts
and ideas on this.
Okay, guys, this is what I want to say. So back to the men and women can't be friends. I will say that if there's feelings involved, it's not going to work. That's why sometimes with friends with benefits, we have people like that. Friends with benefits, you ever notice that somebody always catches feelings in that agreement that this is just friends with benefits? You guys know what I mean, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So when that happens and someone catches feelings, then the whole dynamic changes.
Of course.
Yes. So as long as feelings are involved.
Well, I'm not talking friends with benefits. I'm just talking about friends.
No, but in your specific case, I don't know if you want to go into detail, but with your situation, you still had feelings.
No. I didn't have any friends with benefits. I've never had that relationship with anybody.
But can you be friends? Because you believe you could be friends with someone that you really want to be with, but you can't.
I mean, if you're a mature individual and it becomes clear that you're not going to be together, you can either never see the person again for the rest of your life, or, which is obviously that happens a lot, but you can be friends when you realize that the romantic connection is not going to happen. If it's still a person you admire, it's a person that you enjoy their company,
Sure, and there's exceptions, but most of the time when feelings are involved, it's hard for two people to be friends because...
Maybe not right away. Yeah, maybe not right away, of course. But over time, you put on your big boy pants and you move on, and both people move on, and the affection from the platonic level is still there.
Yes. Roderick, you make a great point. I think what you say is true. And this is why I think it's important for people to gradually, as we go from the transitions of being teenagers to young men, young women, is to understand, don't take rejection so personally so negatively. You say, okay, well, she's not into me. It's okay. That's a prerogative, or vice versa. If a girl feels that way about a young man and she's being rejected or her advances are not being reciprocated, then fine. Don't take it personally. That takes a while to understand that rejection should not result in depression, anxiety, and feeling of helplessness and poor self-esteem, all of those things. So sometimes being rejected is actually a good thing for you in the end.
Of course.
And you learn that in a group dynamic. Your point is a good one. I do not want to say that your off on this. No, you're not.
I
You're
wanna
correct. It's tough.
I do want to add this though. We talk about dating and all this kind of thing, and what I do know is when a woman has feelings for you or likes you, and that's what people have to understand. When they like you or they're into you, it doesn't really matter what you're wearing, what you're driving, where you live, what job you have. When she likes you, she likes you. She'll make exceptions because there's one thing that we can't do. We can't help the way we feel, whether we don't like somebody or if we do like somebody. We're not in control of that. So when someone is into you or someone does like you, he or she's going to look over or look past certain things that they may normally not do, because feelings will change the way you look at things and the way you do things.
Right. Well, people buy emotionally.
Yes.
We know that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then they justify it after the fact.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so that brings us to the last comment, where sometimes guys go, I can do it 7 times in a night. You like me better that way? Seriously, I'm like, dude, 7 times. Bullshit.
Well, you would know as a cardiologist that that's not realistic.
Come on. I've got some young guys. Oh, your generation, you can hardly do it once a week. Me, 7 times a night. I go, dude, obviously it's very poor quality workmanship then. If you can do it 7 times a night, your work must not be very artistic. You and Leonardo da Vinci are just on different planes, not even close. You're like that print artist that's stealing the art from the back of a library and saying you did it, right?
Well,
what say you to that?
Any other points, Roderick, before we wrap this up? I think this has been a great discussion, very informative and funny.
Yeah, I did want to piggyback on something about people feeling like they're bigger than they really are as far as numbers go. We're not talking about looks. We're talking about everything. So
right.
There's something I spoke to a college coach of my friend of mine. He was coaching Division I female soccer at a Division I school. And he also coached boys back in the day. So what he told me, which I didn't know till last year, is in sports, guys sometimes think they're better than they really are, but women might be like great, but they're insecure or they don't feel they're as good as they really are, which was an interesting observation from his 20 years of coaching.
Yes. So what you're saying is that the boys overvalue their own abilities, whereas the girls underestimate their own abilities. And in
sports.
fact, in sports we're talking about. And in fact, often are incredibly more self-critical about their abilities and about what they can do in a competitive arena. And we're speaking about sports, of course.
In my opinion, it goes past sports. Sports was just specifically one thing, but I think there's a lot of that going on in life where women, I don't want to just, say it's just sports.
Well, what's interesting, in my field, there are more women now graduating from medical school, more women completing residencies, more women on staff at major hospitals, occupying high levels from medical executive committees, board of directors, certainly top doctors across the country in Western societies now in many subspecialties, with few exceptions, females are dominating. And, now we have, if you look at teenagers, young men going to university, about 40% of new enrollees are male and 60% females. So that is changing, I think, or that has been changing gradually, where women are not only doing a phenomenal job across the highest professions, penetrating more and more the legal profession, more and more the medical, as I mentioned, in some cases reaching majority, that the old paradigm or the old, thought or idea about poor self-esteem or, like you said, being more critical and seeing themselves as lesser, it has, in my personal experience, has gone away. I have many colleagues that are just feel great about what they do. They're very confident. They'll compete with anybody worldwide. And I'm talking about cardiologists, oncologists.
But you know what that makes me think of as a last point? That's also going to lead to less sex. And let me tell you why. Women, for the most part, are wired. Men want a 24-year-old.
You know, I dated 2 attorneys, right? And it did not lead to less sex.
Well, that's because, let me say this, women are wired to try to find someone at their level or higher.
Yes.
And if women are taking all the highest positions, there's no one for them to feel comfortable.
Again, a great point. Not being my experience, but maybe that's an outlier.
Well,
yes, but your point's a good one.
You're a top-level cardiologist, so they feel that you're at their level.
Your point is a good one, that those women need to have at least somebody who's at least at their level or higher. And it's harder and harder to find.
If you do the math, if 60% of doctors are women, that means 40% of the women get with 40% of the doctors, and that's 20%.
Yeah, but they're not only marrying doctors, okay?
Yeah, but if it's happening,
they're marrying other professionals.
But in all professions, women are now doing more.
And having incredible success.
Right.
You see in politics, you see across almost every high level, CEOs, CFOs,
right.
COOs of companies, innovators.
There's already more women than men.
Yes.
So if the women are more successful than men, it's just a math problem.
And more are going to university, more graduating, and certainly more in the higher professions.
The math doesn't add up.
No doubt. So, but your point is, a high-performing woman is going to have a more difficult time finding a high-performing man.
That's right.
To copulate with.
That's right.
So they need a boy toy? Is that it? Is that your solution here? I'm sure the coach wasn't proposing that. Soccer coach Roderick was talking about wasn't proposing that.
Well, thank you guys. This has been a wonderful discussion. Once again, this has been the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, Davio Venturis. We've been joined by the esteemed cardiologist, Dr. Federico Macy, otherwise known as Dr. Suave, and of course, our wonderful producer, Roderick Mantis. Thank you guys so much. This has been great.
Till next time.
We'll see you next time. Please like and subscribe us on YouTube. You can follow us on Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.